Okay, 7th grade. Today what we are going to do is we're going to talk about an article, or at least part of an article, called Intrinsic Motivation Doesn't Exist, researcher says. But what we're mostly going to be talking about is how to read a complex text. This article is one of the most complex texts we're going to see this year. So, let's get into it. Before we do this, let me review with you what multi-draft reading is. Multi-draft reading means reading something more than one time. It's got the word multi right at the beginning, which means many. It's the same root word as the one in multiply or multiple. And then draft is when you make an attempt at something. Like when you write a first draft of a research paper, that's just your first attempt at the paper. Okay, the first draft of this multi-draft reading process is reading to get a basic understanding. And then the second time you read something, it's to find key ideas and notice the structure. And the third time is when you read to connect the text to the world and to yourself. Today, we're just going to focus on draft 1 and maybe a little bit of draft 2. Alright, let's begin. Reading, as you might know, can sort of be an obstacle course. You are like a runner in an obstacle course, trying to get to the very end. But as you go through the complicated text, you might run into obstacles like difficult words or confusing ideas before you finally get to the end where you can say, I understand, I get it. We're going to read through this and we're going to try to decode those difficult words and break down those confusing ideas. So let's begin the article. Okay, Columbus, Ohio. A lot of news articles will do this. They'll write the location where their article comes from. Okay, while some psychologists still argue that people perform better when they do something because they want to, rather than for some kind of reward, such as money, Stephen Rice suggests that we shouldn't even make that distinction. Rice, a professor of psychology at Ohio State University, argues that a diverse range of human motivations, and we'll continue the rest on the next page. So let's take a look at the stuff we might need to break down here. The words in red are some vocab words that we need to define. So, psychologists. A psychologist is an expert who studies the human mind and behavior. So you could say, while some experts who study the human mind still argue that people perform, and so on. You could say that, but it's a little faster to just use this longer word. Okay, distinction is when you mark something as different. So, Stephen Rice is saying that we shouldn't even be marking these two types of motivation as different. Remember, the first type of motivation is doing something because you want to. And the second type of motivation is doing something for a reward, like money. And Rice is saying those two should not even be separate. He thinks they're more the same thing. We'll talk about that more later. Lastly, the word diverse. This was a word that I believe we had in our vocab list near the beginning of the year. And diverse means of various kinds. So he's saying here, when he says argues that a diverse range of human motivations, that means he's going to be talking about human motivations of various different kinds. Okay, so I'm going to read this last sentence again and then go quickly into our next slide. Rice, a professor of psychology at Ohio State University, argues that a diverse range of human motivations can't be forced into these categories of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Psychologists say intrinsic motivations are those that arise from within, doing something because you want to, while extrinsic motivations mean people are seeking a reward, such as money, a good grade in class, or a trophy at a sporting event. Okay, so in this paragraph, we're going to break down a few confusing ideas. So intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. When you see these, you might first think those look more like vocab words than confusing ideas. But because these come up so much in this article, we're going to treat them as main ideas. So we could go to the dictionary to define intrinsic and extrinsic. But if we read just a little bit further down here, we see that each of these are defined by the article. So, for instance, intrinsic motivations are those that arise from within, doing something because you want to. So we could sort of simplify that by writing Intrinsic motivation is motivation from within. If you've ever been heard that it's important for you to choose a job that you really love instead of a job that just pays a lot of money, the people who tell you that are big fans of intrinsic motivation. They're saying that the motivation to do your job should come from what you love, something from within. Okay, extrinsic motivations mean people are seeking a reward, such as money, a good grade in class, or a trophy at sporting event. So we could simplify that by saying, and extrinsic motivation is motivation from outside, or motivation from a reward. So if you do choose to do a job just because it gets you a lot of money, then you might be following extrinsic motivation. I like to think of it like this. Intrinsic has the word in it, and so we can remember that the motivation for that one comes from within. All right. Extrinsic has the same root as the word external, which means outside. So when we think of when we hear extrinsic motivation, we think of motivation that comes from outside. All right, let's move on. They are taking many diverse human needs and motivations, putting them into just two categories, and then saying one type of motivation is better than another, said Rice, who outlines his argument in the current issue of the journal Behavior Analyst. But there's no real evidence that intrinsic motivation even exists. Okay, let's break this section down. So, most of this is going to be a main idea, but we've got a vocab word up here too, one that we already saw. Now, in this case, diverse means different. So, when that happens, I like to put the simpler word over top of the original word. So we can say instead, they're taking many different human needs and motivations, etc., etc. All right. So now let's take a look at this main idea. They're taking many different human needs and motivations, putting them into just two categories, and then saying one type of motivation is better than another. So it starts off with the word they, and it's said by Rice, so we can conclude that this is not his point of view. So the point of view that he holds is probably going to be in his quote down here. There is no real evidence that intrinsic, remember, this is motivation that comes from inside, motivation even exists. So we could simplify all that by saying, some research are saying intrinsic is better than extrinsic, but Rice says there are more than just those two types of motivation. All right. So that helps us better understand what we're reading here. All right, let's move on to this, I believe, our second to last one. Okay, the issue is more than academic, Rice said. Many sports psychology books and books advising how to motivate students and business people tout the value of intrinsic motivation and warn that extrinsic rewards can undermine people's performance. Okay. Go ahead, I would like you to look up what the word academic means. You can use Google, you can use a dictionary. I don't think this one is in our book though. Okay, hopefully you found that academic means having to do with school. So he's been talking about grades and stuff, but then he goes on to list a bunch of other stuff like sports and business that doesn't have to do with school. Okay, I'd like you now to look up the word tout. Hopefully you found tout means promote. So, if this is one of our words where the definition is just a single word, which means we can paste that word over top the confusing one. Like this, promote. So many sports psychology books and books advising how to motivate students and business people promote the value of intrinsic motivation. And our last one, go ahead and look up what undermine means. Alright, hopefully you found that undermine means destroy, and that's yet another of our single word definitions, so we can put it over top undermine. The value of intrinsic motivation and warn that extrinsic rewards can destroy people's performance. Okay, we will read over this one more time near the end, but for now we can move on. Alright. The argument that people should do something because they enjoy it, the argument is that people should do something because they enjoy it, and that rewards only sabotage natural desire. Rice disagrees. There's no There's no reason that money can't be an effective motivator or that grades can't motivate students in school, he said. It's all a matter of individual differences. Different people are motivated in different ways. All right. We've only got one vocab word right here, and I can tell you this one. Sabotage means to interfere with or to undermine. Now, you might recognize undermine. We just did that one. So we could put another definition for undermine, which is destroy, over top of sabotage, like this. The argument is that people should do something because they enjoy it, and that rewards only destroy natural desire. All right, that helps make it a little simpler. Okay, now I'd like you to read this section right here and tell me what you think the main idea is here. What is Rice trying to communicate to you? And I'll give you a few choices to choose from. Alright, so what he's trying to communicate here is that rewards can motivate people because everyone is motivated by different things. Remember, his opposition, the people up here, are saying that you shouldn't focus on rewards like money or grades. Instead, you should just focus on what you love to do. But Rice says that that's not a problem. You can focus on money and rewards if you want to, because different people get motivated by different things. Alright, that was our last slide, so now we're going to take a second run at this. I'm going to go through these slides, and they'll have all of our notes on them, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of make better sense of it now that we read it as a whole, instead of stopping every 3 seconds to define a word. So let's begin. Columbus, Ohio. While some psychologists still argue that people perform better when they do something because they want to, rather than for some kind of reward, such as money, Stephen Rice suggests that we shouldn't even make that distinction. Rice, a professor of psychology at Ohio State University, argues that a diverse range of human motivations can't be forced into these categories of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Psychologists say intrinsic motivations are those that arise from within, doing something because you want to, while extrinsic motivations mean people are seeking a reward, such as money, a good grade in class, or a trophy at a sporting event. They are taking many different human needs and motivations, putting them into just 2 categories, and then saying one type of motivation is better than another, said Rice, who outlines his argument in the current issue of the journal Behavior Analyst. But there's no real evidence that intrinsic motivation even exists. The issue is more than academic, Rice said. Many sports psychology books and books advising how to motivate students and business people promote the value of intrinsic motivation and warn that extrinsic rewards can destroy people's performance. The argument is that people should do something because they enjoy it, and that rewards only destroy natural desire. Rice disagrees. There is no reason that money can't be an effective motivator, or that grades can't motivate students in school, he said. It's all a matter of individual preferences. Different people are motivated in different ways. We did it! We got through! Okay, hopefully you have arrived at a place where you can say, I get it, or I kind of get it. I would like you to answer this question for me. What does Rice believe about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation? This is kind of a big question, so if you need to, you can go back through these slides and take a look at what he said. I'm going to back up right now so that you can pause and look at the different slides if you need to. So let's go back here. Okay, pause this if you need to. Okay, hopefully you were able to take a chance to read through that again. Go ahead and answer your question here, and then you'll be done for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk with you tomorrow.